Sheema Kermani is a one-woman army, a courageous Pakistani social activist, founder of Tehrik-e-Niswan, known as Women's Movement, and a Bharatanatyam classical dancer. She strongly agrees that without music, life could be a mistake. So how did she develop interest in music and dance, an important form of art?
My mother introduced me to Mr. and Mrs. Ghansham, who were running a rhythmic art center in Karachi, teaching dance and music. And before that, I had been from the age of 8 or 9, I had been learning classical Western music, like the piano, to read and write and play. And then I started with dance classes when I was about 13, 14, at that age. And since then, initially I was not too interested myself, but as I got more and more involved with it, I got more and more interested in it. And then at some points in my life, I decided that this is exactly what I want to do. That was quite late in life, and I went to India to study dance further.
Looking at our society and culture, how was the support that you received from your family to pursue your passion?
Yes, absolutely. My family, in fact, as I said, it was my mother who introduced me to dance. She herself, when she was younger, used to learn dance and play the sitar, and my father was very fond of classical music. So it was through the family that I got the exposure to all these arts initially, and they've always supported them.
Do you regard dance as a form of art, and does it give a message to the society?
Well, I think the fact that in Pakistan dance got banned and became almost taboo. So the fact that one takes dance as one's vocation itself was, I think, a revolutionary step. I think for women, especially, dance is so important because it's about the confidence in your body. It's about the dignity and of female body, and so I think it is a very important thing for the feminist movement in Pakistan for women to understand how they hold themselves, how important the spine is. It gives you strength. Dance is, I think, so essential for finding your inner strength.
What kind of music do you prefer for your performance?
So basically it's classical music, but what I did then is, because a lot of Indian classical dancing is to traditional music, but what I then started doing was using a lot of local poetry, Urdu poetry, English poetry, and choreographing on these subjects, because this is, through contemporary poetry, one could say so much more. That was relevant to society and meaningful to society.
People often encounter stage fear and anxiety. So when you were going for your first solo performance, did you encounter any stage fear?
I think one always has stage fear and one is always nervous before a performance. So because I was a student with Ghanshams, they had a performing group. So I used to perform with them right from the beginning. So I had many performances with them, but first full-fledged solo performance I did when I came back from India. And I did it at a friend's house and invited some friends, and a lot of people turned up because this was the time of General Zia-ul-Haq when dance had already got banned. Right. So many people came to see that performance because it was like a way of supporting an art form that was banned in the country, and it was a way of saying that they are against the fascist Islamic dictatorship of General Zia-ul-Haq. So right from the beginning, I felt my dance was the sense of political statement. Right. A statement about freedom, a statement about liberation, and a statement about women's rights. the right to perform, the right to choose what you want to do. Dance is, and I still feel that dance is something which is almost inherent in the human body. When a child is born, if it doesn't shake its limbs, then the parents would think that there's something wrong. If it doesn't cry, then the parents would think there's something wrong. So, that movement inherent in our body is a form of dance. That voice inherent in our body is the sur that we have. So I think dance is something that cannot be stopped by ordinances or by laws. And also, maybe it's worthwhile mentioning that when Ziaul Haq died and when Nazir Bhutto came into power through a general election, the first democratic open election, where everyone in the streets of Karachi was dancing, because it's a mode of expression. It's a way of when you're happy, you want to dance and sing. So it's a way of expressing oneself, really.
For you, what is your most powerful and memorable performance?
Well, I would mention maybe two performances. One, I had a performance in 1995 in Beijing, China, which was when there was this first international women's conference there, and there was something like 300,000 women who were there for that conference, and I performed at that, and I felt that was it was a very memorable performance for me. I dedicated that performance to my mother, who was also at the Beijing conference, because I felt, mothers who allow their daughters to do the things that are important, that they feel they want to do, and stand by them. Yes. So it was a dedication to that. Another performance that I would like to mention is when the first time I performed in a small town in Sindh, near Bhiksha. Yeah. And I was invited by the late Rasul Baks Palijo, who had formed a women's organization called Sindhiani Tehrik. Yes. And so at that event, there was something like 300,000 people, men and women, and these were people who were like the locals of that area. A lot of them were rural people. A lot of them were what are called haris in Sindh, the peasant people, the people who live in small towns and villages. They were there, and this is soon after Islamization, and nobody in that, people used to say that, dance is un-Islamic, and people of the country don't accept it, and nobody in that audience made that kind of a statement. In fact, we had people got up and clapped, though they'd never seen a classical dance performance before in their lives. So those performances are very memorable for me.
Indhu Mithaji and you are the only two exponents of Bharatanatyam classical dance in Pakistan. How do you see the future of this form of art?
I've done a lot of work on Peshaw's poetry. I've done a lot of work on Femida Riaz's poetry, because I feel that she was one of the most important contemporary Urdu language poets. Yeah. And her poetry speaks to women in this country, and is so important and so revolutionary, and so honest and so truthful, and hits the nail on the head. So I've used a lot of her poetry in my work, and I've performed a 1-hour ballet on using the words of Femida Riaz, and I called that ballet Aao Raqs Karo.
Right.
And this is a poem of hers, which I use in that ballet. And that ballet actually depicts the changing role of women in society, from the time of when people were living in caves to the development of society, and how the status of woman changed with the acquiring private property, and when people started talking about private property, then women became one of the aspects of that concept, that women are also somewhere a man's property. And so it's a very interesting commentary that Pramila wrote, especially for me. Then I've also done a lot of music videos on Pramila's poetry, because my idea was, and this started also almost more than 10 years ago, that I started doing this series of music videos. When music videos are very popular, and I felt that music videos are only promoting and projecting the musicians, but the content was meaningless. So I picked up Pramila's poetry, and we visualized that poetry through the medium of the moving image, and made videos which are meaningful, which are talking about and inspiring, and which are thought-provoking, and gives messages, in a sense. Yeah. Because a lot of my work is what is called social activism, but maybe one could call it cultural activism, really. Using the cultural medium, of performing arts and the moving image to give rights messages. So, a lot of my work, besides performing on stage, is involved with what we call our mobile theatre. You see, when we started this about 35, 40 years ago, that we felt that instead of doing theatre only in auditoriums, we need to take theatre to the people. People who themselves are not able to come into the cities, come into the auditoriums, who cannot buy tickets, who don't have the time or the access to come and see performances. So we started going to different areas, to Kachi Abadis, to the low-income areas, and created small, what we call natak, small plays, and on issues which matter to people, like the fact that women are not given education, the issue of women's health, just the position of women in society, the status of women, the discriminatory attitude towards women, the violence on women. These were the kind of, and then the violence on religious minorities and the attitudes towards religious minorities. So a lot of the work that I do is that we go and perform in various areas. And what this did is created a kind of a movement for theatre, a movement for using performing arts to educate people, to change people's ideas, because basically I feel what the performing arts do is motivate people to rethink their values.
Right.
And I think that if you want to have different values in society, then you can only create those values by inspiring people or motivating people or provoking people to think that, that the existing values, the existing norms are not what people friendly, and you want to create norms that be people friendly, that will help the larger section of the population, and give them options to think that they can change their lives. So this is the empowering effect of these arts. That when you see something, if you think about it, it's films, it's books, it's theatre, it's performances. These are the things that give you ideas.
Yes.
Ideas because what they do is they open up your imagination. And when you open up people's imagination, then people can start imagining, thinking of alternatives. And that's what one needs to have. One needs to have beautiful imaginations that, yes, life can be different. Yes, we can do things to change our life. Yes, we can make choices about our lives. Yes, we can have alternative lifestyles. And yes, we can make our own choices, basically. Well, difficult to say at this point because I feel, things have changed so much. I've trained a lot of students, and I know that Indu Mitaji has also trained a lot of students, but very few of her students, except her daughter perhaps, who also does not live in the country. Very few younger people have taken it up seriously. There are a lot of my students have been performing in Pakistan and abroad, but there are very few of them who've taken it up as a profession, and those who have started now doing a lot of modern dance, contemporary dance. So the classical, I feel, is somehow getting left behind. Because to keep the classical arts going, I think you have to have a different kind of an environment. You have to have an environment where there's appreciation, where there's exposure, and neither of these two things exist actually in this society. And to acknowledge the past, that also does not exist, unfortunately. We do not acknowledge our past. We do not acknowledge our heritage, our history. And so I don't know. There are young people who are dancing, who are doing modern dance, who are doing hip-hop, who are doing mixing, whatever they've learned from the classical. But the purity of classical arts also needs to be preserved. And that I don't really see going anywhere. And for me, it's very important. That's why I continue to teach. For the last more than 30, almost 40 years now, I've been teaching. And I teach young people. I teach a lot of students who can't afford to pay a fees, because I just feel that, maybe out of that lot, somebody will take it up seriously. So I think it's very important for me that the tradition continues. And in that regard, I have my own studio, and I have a dance group, and I continue to teach. That's the only way. I also give lecture demonstrations. I've tried in schools, in colleges, as much as possible to to give it more exposure. I feel a lot of people still do not know what actually classical dancing is, because our media does not give it any exposure. Right now there's so many TV channels, but no channel has any program on classical dance or classical music.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I feel the state also, and the state and the government also needs to play a role in this whole thing of preserving your traditional arts. But our state has never managed to do that, never wanted to do it. There's no political will for that kind of a thing. That is the saddest part.
Music and dance is not accepted and has often received criticism from certain sect of the society. As a woman having passion for art, how did you courageously face the backlash?
Yes, right from the beginning, when I started performing, when I came back from India and started performing a classical repertoire of Bharatanatyam, or a classical repertoire of Odissi, or even a classical repertoire of Kathak, there was a lot of criticism that, this is not Pakistani.
Yes.
This is not Islamic. But I just have always countered that by saying that you can't divide the arts on the basis of religion. Yes. You can't say that this is Hindu art and this is Islamic art. Yes. You can say that, this is a Muslim dancer or this is a Hindu dancer. You can say that if you like, but you can't divide arts in that way. And so that has been my way of countering that. And also when I have explored anthropology and historical background and shown through work that I've done. Like I created a ballet in 1992 called The Song of Mohenjo-daro. Okay. And through that, in that ballet, actually explore how dance was part of the culture of Mohenjo-daro. So if we acknowledge that we are part of that Indus Valley civilization, then we have to acknowledge that dances and theatre, performing arts have been part of our heritage and of our culture and our historical cultural background. I also there are seals, there are statuettes from that period which have been found. So I sort of I've brought that into the limelight and tried to talk about all of this. And this is my way of countering it. I think what I can say is that if you believe that this is something truthful, and if you believe that this is something honest and beautiful, then you have to pursue it. Nothing could make. I lived through 11 years of General Ziaul Haq and what's following rise of fundamentalism, which I think still exists in our society. And I've always said that, dance is part of our culture and it is my right to do it. And I would say that people should pursue their historical, cultural heritage, because unless you acknowledge your past and you can't build a future, so I would just say that irrespective of what people say, what you believe in, you have to pursue, and that is the only way you can lead a truthful life.
You are the founder of Women's Movement, Tehrik-e-Niswan, and a strong supporter of Women's March. What triggered you to come up with this concept and start a powerful movement for women in Pakistan?
A group of us started Tehrik-e-Niswan in the late 1970s. And the idea was exactly this, that, who in Pakistan is the most oppressed of the all, of the oppressed. And we thought it was a working woman, the working class woman of Pakistan who was the most oppressed. And so that is where Tehrik-e-Niswan started, that let's talk about the working class woman. Let's talk about the problems of the working class woman. That when a woman goes to work, what happens? Where does she leave her children? So it was part of the working class women's demand that if you're working somewhere and the employer has a large number of women employed there, then the employer must provide space for little children to be brought and kept there, like nurseries or daycare centers or at workspaces. And equal wages. Pakistan is the thing is when somebody is part of has signed the document on equal wages ordinance by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, and Pakistan has ratified that. But Pakistan does not pay equal wages to women who are doing the same work as men. So these were the kind of issues that we started with, and we also felt that women need a platform to express their creative potential.
Yes.
And so basically that is what Tehrik-e-Niswan became, a space to explore the creative potential of women. So many people write poetry, young girls write poetry, but there are no mushairas where, when you have a mushaira, there'll be 50 men and 2 women poets. But so many women do write poetry. So one of the first things that Tehrik-e-Niswan did was to have all women mushaira. So of course the audience was mixed, but the poets were all women. And that gave a platform to young girls, to senior women to come and read their poetry. And from there on we started doing these kind of things, with creating little plays on women's issues and creating a dialogue through these plays. Because, after a small play in a low-income area, we try to have a dialogue with the audience. Like, why is this? Why do the families decide that, no, the education must only be to the son and not to the daughter? Why should daughters not be allowed education? And I think when the dialogue starts, when people start thinking, yes, maybe we are wrong, maybe we need to change our attitude and ideas. So that is basically what Tehrik-e-Niswan does. It tries to provoke people to think, and it uses a medium of the cultural medium of the performing arts to bring that out. So we started this concept of Aurat March in 2000 the first one was 17, 18, and in 2018. The first Aurat March took place in 2018. So it was a group of us women. I was one of the founders of the Aurat March. A group of us women got together, and we talked about, because Aurat March, women's marches were happening 4 or 5 years ago all over the world. In America, women were, in Europe, women were marching for their rights. Women have marched throughout history for their rights. Hundreds of years ago, women have been marching. There was a suffragist movement. There was a Women for 8th March, the International Women's Day, to talk about equal wages, to talk about working hours for women. And so why don't we in Pakistan have a women's march? And so we decided that we should do that. And because also the violence of women has been rising so much in the last 10, 15 years. And I think we need to bring that out. We need to talk about it. Now, these issues like the right to divorce, the right to abortion, the right to choose what you want to do with your life, these are topics that are almost taboo in our society, have been. And we felt that it's time we started talking about these things, and so that's how we started the Aurat March, the first Aurat March, and then we did one in 19, and then this year we had our third Aurat March. And every year it's becoming more and more dynamic. More and more women are taking part in it. They from all classes join up. And I think it has had an amazing ripple effect, because if you see now, today, there are so many people who talk about women's rights. There's so many people, women's issues are always, in the forefront. And I think Aurat March has helped create that kind of an environment and atmosphere. And then there was this Me Too movement also. It started 3 years ago all over the world, and we picked it up. I was part of one of the first cases that was brought against a very well-known Urdu poet of Pakistan, where a female university professor was harassed by him, almost sexually assaulted by him. And then we brought that case out we fought that case. We went to court about it. Right. And so I think, these things are important now. And I think women in Pakistan have also decided that it is time. We are not going to take these things quietly and silently and not speak out. So you see, there are a lot of women now who are speaking out, who are talking about these things, who have said that, who decided that no, we will not bear it anymore. We will not bear the violence on us anymore. It's better to live as a single woman than to live in unhappy situations of violence.
Yes.
Things like that. So I think this has been, it has been a very positive thing, in spite of the backlash that we have faced. When we do something which is pioneering, which is different, there will be a backlash. When women started in UK to talk about the right to vote, the suffragists faced a lot of backlash. They were, they were inflicted with a lot of violence. They were in jail, they were beaten, they were imprisoned, they went on hunger strike, but they were forced fed. So, these things are part of the struggle. I would say. Started when the first International Women's Day was celebrated by us in 1918. Nobody knew what International Women's Day meant and what it stood for and why we're talking about women. But today, I mean, if you look at 8th March International Women's Day, all over the city there are many events happening and everybody is talking about women's rights issues and women themselves have come out and are feeling empowered. But at the same time, I think there is still a lot of more work to be done and the movement has to continue and it still has a long way to go.
I am very thankful to you for your extremely meaningful work and activism. Every woman is strong. She is important and has the right to decide about her life. Sheema Kermani, courageous Pakistani social activist, founder of Tehrik-e-Niswan Women's Movement.